are simply too many stories I could tell to highlight this, so I've just chosen a couple of my favourites. A particular favourite of mine happened during a period when Christopher returned home from university and lived at home without a job, a direction, or anything at all really. Regularly, Mum would return home from work to find that Christopher hadn't mustered the energy required to get out of bed. It was during this period she likened living with Christopher to living with an evil-natured tramp. When I got back from school, Christopher and I would while away the long hot evenings, kicking balls over the house and fighting in the garden. One evening, I recall, the scrapping got out of control and an argument ensued. This was not uncommon. On this particular occasion, I developed a plan to settle the argument. A plan which essentially consisted of throwing a ball very hard at Christopher's face. Admittedly, not the best plan, but I think you'll agree it was built on solid foundations. I grabbed a ball and casually strolled into the living room, where Christopher was probably watching Flash Gordon for the third time that day. I sat opposite him and pretended to watch the film. Shaking with excitement, I waited until I could wait no more. I pulled the ball from my pocket and I launched it at Christopher's face. Incredibly, Christopher managed to get his fist up in time to block the ball. But in his haste, he managed to repel it to the far side of the room. We both looked in horror as the ball made contact with one of our mother's ornamental plates and managed to unhook it from the wall. We watched in slow motion as the plate began to drop, unhooking two other ornamental plates hanging directly beneath it as it fell. The three plates smashed into surprisingly small pieces on the fireplace below. Christopher calmly requested that I went and got him a pillowcase, and we picked up every piece we could. He then spent the rest of the day intricately gluing the pieces back together. In fact, he did such a good job that when I told my mother I was going to tell this story a few weeks ago, she wasn't aware that the plates had ever even been broken. In recent years, Christopher's clumsiness has perhaps unsurprisingly coincided with his drinking. Those of you who have been to Glastonbury Festival with Christopher will know that at any given point during the 5 days of the festival, he will be 3 sheets to the wind. Over the years we've been going to Glastonbury Festival together, we've had some great times, and his continuous state of drunkenness has been a constant source of amusement. 2005 was the first year Christopher and I went to Glastonbury together. Torrential rain on the first night of the festival turned the site into a mud bath. A friend of mine was arriving a day late, and we agreed to meet her at the cider bus. When she arrived, I introduced her to my brother's friends, and then my brother. "This is Chris," I said, pointing to a slouched figure staring into a pint of dry cider. "Hi, Chris," she said. There was a brief pause while Chris registered someone was talking to him. And then imagine my horror as he looked up from his pint and grunted, "Who's this muddy bitch?" Little did Christopher know, these were words that were going to come back to haunt him. 3 very muddy Glastonbury days later, Christopher fell victim to Glastonbury Festival's most intimidating threat, the stack. Whether he fell due to his inherent malcoordination, or whether it was an cider-induced incident, we will never know. All I know is that it led to one of my favourite Christopher quotes of all time. As a Glastonbury veteran, Christopher is well aware of the importance of wet wipes and the critical role that they play, particularly as the weekend draws on and the situation in the toilets turns from horrendous to life-threatening. I believe at the time of the incident, Christopher was down to his last 3 wet wipes. And knowing Christopher, this would have been the precise number of wet wipes to see him through to the end of the festival. But the fall changed everything. Christopher pulled himself up from the mud, covered head to toe, and calmly pronounced, "Ian, there is a packet of wet wipes in my right-hand trouser pocket. Please remove one and pass it to me. Don't give me another unless I'm literally begging for it." Christopher is well known for his intriguing and occasionally spellbinding outfits. Although in fairness, he does appear to have scrubbed up rather well today. I think Christopher's fashion sense was forced upon him by our parents when he was young, as seemingly they would dress him in whatever they found lying around. I remember all too well the arguments I would have with my mother about wearing Christopher's hand-me-downs. "I don't know what's wrong with you," she would say. Christopher would wear anything. And I think this is an approach to clothing that has stuck with Christopher. In the summer of 2009, Christopher and I met up to have a game of squash. It was a period of my life when I was living out the boot of my Fiesta. So at any given point, I would have all of my worldly possessions with me. After the game, Christopher and I went out to my car, and he told me he hadn't brought a change of clothes with him. Could he borrow something, he asked. Knowing full well I'd never get it back, I dug out an old t-shirt I kept with me for decorating it. Several months later, I met Christopher for a drink after work at his office in London. I stood in the car park waiting for him to come out, and imagine my disbelief as the door opened and Christopher appeared wearing my old painting t-shirt and looking like an office janitor. Christopher is well known for his mathematical mind and his extensive knowledge on virtually any topic. This is a trait which has earned him the nickname in the Coop family as the nasty know-it-all. Emma and I extensively use the phrase, another string to Christopher's bow, when yet another topic crops up that Christopher turns out to be an expert on. A favourite example of mine was when me, Emma and Chris were driving over the Westway flyover. Emma asked whether either of us knew how it was built, to which Christopher replied, yes, I actually worked on the construction of this road. Motorway flyover construction, another string to Christopher's bow. Christopher was clearly intelligent, even from an early age. When I asked my mother for some stories to tell in my speech, she wrote me a list, and under the subtitle, A Very Strange and Clever Little Boy, they read a list that looked like the Rain Man's business card. Completing jigsaw puzzles, with the pieces upside down and without looking at the picture. Always scribbling mathematical formula on scraps of paper. Telling weird and wonderful stories. And odd eating habits, a diet of only fish fingers and pork pies. But it hasn't always been easy being Christopher's younger brother. Imagine always being a disappointment to family and teachers alike. Imagine being told at parents' evening, it's a shame you're not more like your brother. Imagine sharing the same surname as a pupil that teachers would well up about when they recalled breathtaking drama performances and mathematical breakthroughs. Imagine, if you can, having never won a board game. Save your tears and your pity, because he's been a pretty good brother all in all, and I'm very proud to be his best man today. Plus, I never would have got a B in GCSE maths at the end of my coursework. I think we can all agree that Helen and Chris make a great couple, and are a perfect match for one another. Christopher has found someone who is willing to play one-on-one Scrabble with him, which if you ask me is reason enough alone. If you're anything like me, you also breathed a sigh of relief when Christopher finally proposed to Helen in Paris. I was particularly relieved, having received a phone call from Christopher the day before they left. I think I'm going to propose to Helen this weekend, he said. Well, that's great, I replied. But my congratulations were cut short by Christopher swiftly adding, you don't know what ring size Helen is, do you? To most people, the ring would be something you might give time to prior to the day before you left, but not Christopher. To his credit, he did manage to get a ring in the nick of time, and in true Christopher style, while Helen was sleeping, he matched one of her existing rings to the lid of a nail varnish pot. Quite an impressive solution, I thought. Anyway, that is about it for me. I won't keep us in the barbecue any longer. I hope you will join me in wishing the new Mr. and Mrs. Coote every happiness for the future. To Helen and Chris. And I will leave you with this last word. And it was a comment made by Christian's piano teacher when in secondary school. And I think it sums up my speech rather nicely. It was neither as good as we'd hoped for, nor as bad as we'd feared. Thank you very much.